All right, so with this first module, we are actually going to apply the knowledge we have received in the first module on real-life use cases when we are going to be investigating an event that we see on our endpoint. And we will try to validate if it's actually something that we should care about and how we can quickly contain this threat and what our next steps should be. And we will do it automatically by using Python, and we will learn a couple of APIs for those respective solutions along the way. But first, we will start by just circling back and getting on the same page with why threat hunting is one of the most common use cases for the automation, generally because even according to SANS threat hunting survey over the past few years, we see the same trend. The companies, majority of the companies do not identify themselves as matured. If we look at threat hunting maturity metrics, and the reason for that is because of the challenges that are listed on the slide, right? There's lack of resources, lack of skilled threat hunters. It's alert fatigue. It's very hard to find very good reliable and full threat intelligence information. And it's very hard to get the larger internet-wide scope visibility into attacks, campaigns, and things like that. This is why threat hunting teams are working with incomplete or unreliable data, and they're dealing also with limited resources challenges, right? And plethora of alerts. That's why they themselves do not identify themselves as matured. So on the top, you see actually the results of that survey. You see the majority of the companies identify themselves as maturing or immature. And the big two factors they also mention is first, they're not utilizing their tools to full extent, like all of the features and capabilities of those tools, and they're not automating around those capabilities. So that's essentially what we will try to do today, to introduce a little bit more to some of the features and capabilities that you have with the APIs and some of the automation use cases for those security tools, and walk you through one specific automation scenario so that your company can eventually move towards matured state and you can focus more on real threat hunting versus dealing with alerts. So another reason we are looking at this specific use case with taking an endpoint event as an example is because that's what majority of the companies do. They look at events that are already and alarms that are already present in their environment that they either get from SIEM or an EDR or an IDS or an IPS systems, so something that has been already detected in their environment, and they triage those events, right? And that's essentially what majority of the companies call threat hunting, right? But essentially, what we want to show is that automation is going to help you to automate those triage processes so that you can really focus on proactive threat hunting, coming up with hypotheses about something that has not been detected in your environment, validate them, and then circle back and improve your security controls and so on and so forth, right? So essentially maturing the overall security posture of your organization. There are many other areas where automation can help with SOC operations, right? And there are different methodologies that companies use, but essentially, automation can help in any of these processes. And the more your process is well defined, the easier it will be for you to automate them. And there's the whole discussion we can have about it, where it's best to start. I usually like to draw the chart about like how from the point of how well the process is defined and how much effort it takes, right? And if it's well defined and it takes a lot of effort to do it manually, this is where you automate, right? Because that's your low-hanging fruit to receive that payback and exponential value grow from automating those processes. And then we say that will free up time for you to define the other processes better and then eventually automate them as well. But then we walk through specific use case we will be looking at today. We are looking at secure endpoint event, which shows that there has been malware execution attempt on the endpoint. We will take information about that malware file hash, and we will query our sandbox and malware analytics platform, secure malware analytics, to find a report about this sample. From that report, we will find out network activity details about IPs and domains that this malware is trying to reach when it's executed. And we will use Umbrella, which is our DNS security and secure internet gateway solution, to find intelligence information about those domains. Are they malicious or not? We will find out they're malicious, and we will block those domains in our DNS security solution using Umbrella Enforcement API. And then tomorrow in SecureX module, and I have a typo. In SecureX module, we will do the same, but using SecureX APIs, which aggregates all of that data, essentially. So that's just a step-by-step overview of what we are going to do, right? And which APIs we're going to be leverage, and what is going to be the end outcome of this exercise. And from here, we go into the first solution that we are going to explore, which is Cisco Secure Endpoint. And at this point, I want to tell that if the customers or the students are not using Cisco EDR, the API capabilities we are looking for are must-have, and they are generally present in 99% of EDR solutions. Let's put it this way. So even if they're using a third-party solution, it's safe to say with high level of confidence that that solution has similar API capabilities, and they can automate a similar use case in their environment as well. So let's say, most commonly it would be CrowdStrike. So CrowdStrike has API capability parity with Cisco Secure Endpoint. So we can safely say that they can apply the knowledge, the practical knowledge they gain in their own environment as well. So a quick primer on Cisco Secure Endpoint. I think everyone here is familiar with what that is, so I don't need to spend time on it, right? So one thing is to highlight the key features, right? The threat hunting, file trajectory, retrospective detection and analysis, behavior indicators that get correlated across like global data, the integration with SecureX, right? And then it, because of integration with other solutions in Cisco security portfolio, it allows us to block the malicious file once, and that gets propagated across all of your control points and infrastructure. And you basically highlight those key differentiators and key capabilities. And this deck, as Brian mentioned already, it has extensive speaker notes, which gives you plenty of information to make this your own story out of it. So definitely a good read and a lot of information to build your own speaking story. So again, this slide just goes a little bit over, and I thought that it was hidden. There's actually a hidden slide. That's another alert, right? There are a lot of hidden slides in this deck that are for speaker reference or to give you a little bit more depth of knowledge, and maybe to give you a choice of which slides you actually want to include in your presentation and which you want to hide. But there are a lot of hidden slides with some additional context and background that you can either use or just use for your own information. And this slide is meant to show that with secure endpoints, APIs are being used everywhere to fuel integration and some of the automated actions as we talk about this whole ecosystem, right, with Orbital, with malware analytics, with global threat intelligence data, integrating with SecureX threat response, and so on. So that's just showing the value of the APIs across automating different SOC operations and integrating with other security solutions as well. There are two sets of APIs with Cisco Secure Endpoint. There are original one, which is version 0 and version 1, which allows you to collect data about your endpoints, the users, collect data about the groups that these endpoints are part of, events related to specific endpoints, gives you access to collect forensic snapshot using orbital integration, right? Again, get information about the policies that are configured in your environment, specific vulnerabilities and indicators of compromise. So you can read data using those APIs, and you can also modify some data and perform some actions, such as block or add file hashes to file lists with specific actions configured for those file lists, such as block action or some automated actions, and isolate endpoint or move endpoint between different policy groups. For example, if there is a specific event happening on the endpoint, you can move it to triage group, which will limit network access for that specific endpoint, and so on. And then there is a new set of APIs, which is V3, which gives you a little bit of additional capabilities. Essentially, it allows you to read more data and generate additional reports based on that data. It gives you more data about the policies, associated network control lists, computers groups, but it's all read-only. So it doesn't let you modify those policies. It just allows you to read that data. And I included the links to documentation for each of those APIs. So a quick example of how secure endpoint APIs could be used is, in this example, we want to get a list of endpoints which have some file activities, which have some files executed, for example, on those endpoints, right? And for those endpoints, the next step we want to take, if we want to move those endpoints to triage group so that we can further investigate what's happening with those endpoints. And that's something we will be doing in our exercise, the hands-on part as well. We will be doing some containment actions on those endpoints. So here's an example of an integration, a built-in integration using APIs where we can configure integration with Firepower Management Center that will get vulnerability data from Cisco Secure Endpoints for respective host and enrich host input information within FMC and provide that data per host from our secure endpoint solution. So that's a built-in integration that leverages API capabilities as well. So one thing we always start with when we start learning the new APIs is we start by understanding how to authenticate to that API. In this case, there are different ways you can authenticate depending on the API version. For version 0 and version 1 API, so for the old API, let's call them this way, there are two ways to authenticate. The best practice is to use base64 encoded string in authorization header when you create your API call, but you can also use your API client ID and client key that you generate to actually work with the APIs directly in REST URI, but that's not recommended version, right? Because you expose your API key here in free text form. So we recommend generating a base 64 form and even with HTTPS, right? So it's not recommended in general because you will have to use it in a variable in the free form text. So we recommend using base 64 encoding, and this is what we use in our labs. And then with the new set of APIs, we're actually going to use SecureX token. So you don't to authenticate and get access to these APIs. So first, to be able to use new APIs, version 3 APIs, you would have to integrate SecureX with secure endpoint with SecureX, and that's something that we are going to look on at day 2, how to do it. It's fairly straightforward, right? It's pretty much one-click integration action. And then once you integrated secure endpoint with SecureX, you would need to go to SecureX and create your API client there, which will provide you with API client and key pair. And then you would use that key pair to create SecureX access token. And then you would use that access token to generate secure endpoint access token. And only after that, you would get access to secure endpoint APIs. Don't ask me what I think about this whole flow. Okay. But that's the way it is. And I have a Postman collection that walks through that I have received from Thorsten that I need to get my hands on first before I can share it with you guys as well. But it's less complicated than it sounds, and we are not using v3 APIs yet in these labs. So I just have it here for information that there is new API that is using SecureX integration and SecureX token to actually get access to those APIs. And it's different from the legacy APIs flow, and the documentation is here to actually walk the students through this if needed. So I included these slides just to make sure we have complete information for Cisco Secure Endpoint APIs, but we're not using v3 APIs in any of these labs. So with that, the first exercise would be to get started and get familiar with Cisco Secure Endpoint APIs. It's up to you whether you want to break here and let them do the exercises or you want to continue with the next section. With Brian, when we did it virtually, we would usually continue with Umbrella slides first, and then we would let them do both Secure Endpoint and Umbrella labs one after another in a separate lab section. So here is we will do the same for this train the trainer example as well. So in Cisco Secure Endpoint lab, it would take them approximately 20 minutes. And first they would learn how to do some simple GET calls with Secure Endpoint APIs to be able to get event types, get events in general for all computers. And then they will learn how to create more sophisticated API calls by using some query parameters and query API for specific endpoint, using endpoint name to get its ID, and then using ID to query for events related to that specific endpoint and specific event types that we care about, such as if there is a threat detected event, then we want to look at that event for this endpoint. So it gradually builds up, similar to like if you would work with a CLI, you would first learn to do some show commands, and then you would actually learn like more sophisticated configuration commands. So here we're taking the same approach. We're showing them how to do some simple GET calls, and then we show them how to do more complex scenarios for specific use case. So after that, we go to the second theory part, which is Cisco Malware Analytics API. section, which is former threat grid. Before I move on to the next section, do you guys have any questions on the first section or any comments, observations? Okay, well, the most important part in these sections, right, is to talk to them more about the automation use case scenarios and the API capabilities. And we do emphasize more on that than just actually showing them specific API calls, which they will work with mainly in the labs by themselves. So in the secure malware analytics API section, again, we start by just general overview of what that tool is. And I'll be honest with you, in all the labs, all the sessions we did, very few people actually use secure malware analytics, but it allows us to talk about those unique capabilities as well, especially since curated feeds from secure malware analytics are included in SecureX Global Intelligence, right? And in that intelligence is also fed in other Cisco security solutions. So they leverage that intelligence even if they don't have that tool as a sandbox tool for their own organization anyway. So it's worth covering it, and it is still relevant to the threat hunting scenario if that we're walking them through. So essentially, secure malware analytics is malware analytics and threat intelligence platform, which allows to analyze malware samples, right? It has global sensors, detectors, honeypots to get some global visibility into things that are happening across the globe. It also gets telemetry from customers that allow to get us that telemetry, but it also allows you as a customer to have your own telemetry by analyzing your own samples in the sandbox environment, right? It does static and dynamic analysis of of those samples. It does global correlation with a giant database of malicious indicators from around the globe. And all of the data is being fed into giant threat intelligence database that actually you can get access to, and you can leverage that threat intelligence in various ways in your threat hunting and investigation activities, right? So you can get threat scores, you can get behavior indicators, you can get observables associated with samples relevant to your organization, you can get analysis reports, and so on. And that tool also has a very robust APIs, allowing you to automate around all of those activities, right? So a quick primer that you can skip if you want to on what static analysis means and what dynamic analysis means. Essentially, static means what that file is, and dynamic means what that file actually does by detonating this file in the sandboxing environment using obfuscation techniques. But what we care about is that threat intelligence that I mentioned. And I mentioned that is goes through global correlation, and that allows to generate this kind of reports with information in human readable form about behavior indicators that this sample exhibits and the threat score, so that even a junior analyst can make sense of something that is malicious and understand why it is malicious, what kind of behavior that was exhibited allows us to show and grab additional artifacts for further investigation. So that's a very cool tool that we can use. So how we can actually get access to the data via the API? We can fetch full analysis reports. We can fetch specific data from the report, such as we can ask the API to show us only domains from network activity section of the sample report that this malicious sample exhibited when it was executed. And that's essentially, in fact, what we're going to do in the lab. You can also create your own feeds based on behavior indicators and observables seen by samples submitted by your organization, or you can use curated feeds, which is pre-processed, pre-whitelisted by Talos Group set of feeds that give you access by hour or daily to high confidence malicious indicators that you can use to automate investigations and threat hunting in your organization. So again, I don't know why these slides are not hidden. Majority of the slides are hidden in the deck, but essentially it gets us to the, there are a lot of additional slides that are hidden in the deck. Essentially, it gets us to the final slide here before the exercise is what are the most common use cases that we can see with secure malware analytics that our customers use. They use to submit files for analysis, obviously. It's also, those APIs are usually also used by built-in integrations as well. They use APIs to fetch analysis results, right? Fetch that threat intelligence feeds and use them for analysis and threat hunting within their organizations. And then they use APIs to create reports and dashboards as well. So that's what we see those APIs being used. And in the lab, what we are going to do is we are going to take malicious file hash that we have seen on our endpoint in the first lab. We are going to search malware analytics threat intelligence database to find if this file hash has already been analyzed somewhere, and we will fetch that analysis report and find information about the network activity for this file, such as IPs, domains that this file is reaching out to when it's executed, and we will and that will be output of the lab. The goal of the lab is to find network activity for this malicious file so that we can do something with it in the next section.